everybody. Glad to see or hear or have everybody out there today. Beautiful day today. Hopefully you'll have an opportunity to get outside and enjoy some of this gorgeous weather because we know it isn't going to last for long. And you can leave your organizing of your family history to another day when it's lousy out. But today we're going to talk about organizing, and this is a topic that many of us struggle with, myself included. Everybody at one time or another or constantly has issues with organization. And it's a topic that I get asked about a lot. People ask me tips for organizing, what do you suggest? How do you do it, etc. And there's no real good answer to that question. So with that in mind, we're going to go through some ideas today for organizing, and we're going to talk about different types of organization too. So we're going to try to think about organizing in a little different way than maybe you've thought about it before. So just an overview of some of the topics we're going to try to tackle today. We're going to talk about the paper monster, which we all know about. That's the piles of papers that you have laying all over the place. And if you live in my house, then a lot of those piles have to do with genealogy things. And we're going to talk about technology. Technology can be very daunting. It can be something that maybe we don't necessarily want to get involved in because we don't consider ourselves to be very tech savvy. But technology really can work for you depending on the level that you decide to get involved with, whether you only want to do a little or you want to go whole hog into it. Whatever you want to do, technology can be very helpful. We're going to talk about using the GPS, and the GPS is not going to be your Garmin. It's called the Genealogical Proof Standard. We're going to talk about that and how that can help you with organization. And we're going to talk about a little bit about pictures, because that's another thing that people struggle with. Lots of us have boxes and photo albums and slides and things like that that we just don't know what to do with them. And the amount of them and where they're stored, it just seems so overwhelming. So we're gonna go into that a little bit. All right, so organization, we think about organization, and I think a lot of times when we're thinking about organization, and especially when it comes to genealogy, we're thinking about all of those papers that we acquire. A lot of times back in the day when I first started doing genealogy, a lot of things were recorded on paper. There were copies made from things in books. We made paper copies of microfilm things that we were looking up. So we ended up with a lot of paper. And you would think that in this day and age, with everything being so digitized and a lot of the work we're doing being online, that we would have less paper. Well, sometimes, and I'm like this, and maybe a lot of you are like this, I tend to think of, I want to be able to look at a record on paper. So a lot of times I will actually print things. I've gotten away from this a little bit in the last few years, but I still like the tangibility of being able to hold that piece of paper in my hand. So a lot of times what I end up doing is I end up printing a page so that I can examine it or bring it with me or look at it wherever, or, scan it or whatever I want to do with it. And then I say, okay, well, I've got this piece of paper. What am I going to do with this piece of paper? I've got to file it in some way, or I've got to organize it in some way that I'm going to be able to find it later, and then I'm going to be able to know what it is. So those are a couple of the issues that we deal with when we think of organization. But also, if you think about in terms of organization, we can also think about things other than just paper. How about organizing how we do our research? A lot of us just kind of sit down at the computer, start with a person, and start looking around. And how many times when you've done that have you end up gone off on some tangent where you are, 1 minute you're researching your grandmother, and then an hour later you're looking into people in a different state or a different county, and you've just gotten off on all these different tangents. Well, that's certainly sometimes helpful, but other times it can be distracting. It can be a time waster. It can cause you to lose the focus that you need to do efficient research. So if we think in terms of organization, as far as organizing how we do our research, then that can also be very helpful to help us to get the most out of the time that we have for family history. So if we think about the things that we have done because of disorganization, what are the things that we've done? All of us, shuffling through stacks of paper. Where did I put that birth certificate? Where is grandma's date of death? How come I can't find that letter I got from my cousin? So all of these things are things that we've done. I can tell you that when I meet with people one-on-one, one of the biggest factors toward not being able to use our time efficiently is the fact that a lot of people have to look through papers to try to find information that they're looking for. And a lot of times they won't have it with them or they won't know where it is. So it's definitely something that we all are guilty of. Another thing that I've done, and I really hate this is something that I really don't like, is I've gone out and purchased something for family history and then found it somewhere in my house. So sometimes we all know in New York State, we have to pay $22 for birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates. You would think that spending $22 for a document would cause you to file it in a place where you could find it again. But no, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes we got a death certificate maybe 10 or 15 years ago and we don't know what we did with it, or we forget that we got it and we go ahead and we purchase it again. And this is all a function of being disorganized. If we had a good organizing system, we would know that we had that document, so we wouldn't have to purchase it again. So that's a waste of our good money. And then there's always those things that we get from family members. You know, maybe we get a picture, or maybe we get a diary, or maybe we get a letter that has family information in it. And we put it down and it ends up in the stack of papers that are meant for something else. And we forget where it is. So again, we don't have a very good system for doing something with those pieces of paper that can be very invaluable to our research. So it's all about finding some kind of system. So if we've had any of these problems, it's absolutely time to organize. And honestly, it is a really good time to organize because a lot of us are spending more time at home these days. And it's the time to start tackling some of those organizational projects that you've been putting off. Also, we think about the costs. And of course, disorganization is always involved with cost. There's always some price to pay for being disorganized. Time wasting is definitely a big one. You're wasting time going over and over the same things that you've been over before because you haven't made note of them, or you haven't written down the sources that you've checked, or you can't find them. So you're wasting time. You're also wasting money. You're wasting money on buying things that you may already have. A huge one is that you feel very overwhelmed by the mess. So sometimes when we think about, wow, I really would like to work on my genealogy, but I'm just so overwhelmed because it's such a mess right now, and I don't even know where to start. And I think when we feel overwhelmed and when we feel like we don't have a good starting point, we tend to put things off. And unlike real life things like paying bills or keeping on top of our taxes or anything like that, we kind of look at genealogy like a hobby. So maybe it's not a huge priority. And so we think, okay, well, you know, I can get to that another day. So feeling overwhelmed is very common. And then another thing that, you know, sometimes might go along with it is that you kind of feel like a failure. You know, you think a few years ago, you might have thought, hey, I'm going to do my family history. I'm going to share it with everybody. I'm going to tell family stories. When we get together on Thanksgiving and Christmas, we're going to have all of these fun things to talk about. And then when you get overwhelmed and disorganized, you feel like you failed in your mission to bring those important stories to your family. So that can be another huge cost of being disorganized. So what are we going to do about it? Let's see what we can do. All right, so I love this little graphic of the paper monster. He's actually kind of cute. If he wasn't so scary, I would think he would be kind of cute. But the paper monster is a very real thing. Personally, I have boxes and filing cabinets full of papers. Fortunately, I have a fairly decent filing system, but every so often the paper does overwhelm me. And my solution is to take all of the bits of paper that are scattered around my desk or around my chair in the living room or in my basket next to my chair or in the office in my house and dump all of the paper that's loose onto my dining room table and just start sorting. So everybody is guilty of this. Everybody knows that they've got a paper monster somewhere in their house, and a lot of times it tends to be the genealogy paper monster. So I would say the number one tip for dealing with the genealogy paper monster is to find a system that you like and stick with it. Now, unfortunately, I can't tell you what system is going to be the best one for you. That has to be a personal decision. And that has to be something that you are going to feel comfortable using. It's going to be something that you feel that you can handle. It's going to be something that you don't feel overwhelmed every single time you think about it. It's going to be something that maybe you might even be excited to use. So whatever system that you find, commit to it and make it a point to work with it. It's not a good idea to switch systems. So don't say, I'm going to purchase genealogy software, but then decide you don't want to use it and then go back to file folders. Probably not a good idea to do that. Full confession, I do use a combination of things. So I don't use one complete system, but I do use fairly consistent combinations. So the point is that you really need to come up with a system that you like and stick with it. So one of the most basic of filing systems is going to be things that include real actual paper. And that's going to be things like file folders, binders, color coding, actual physical things that you can use to file. Now, some ideas for how do you file the papers. You can have a file folder for every surname in your family. That might be a way to do it. You could do it by a couple or a family. So you could do all of the documents that relate to the family of Edward Jones and Mary Smith, for example. You could do it by family line. So you could do everything that relates to Edward Jones and Mary Smith and their descendants. Or you could do it by event. So say you want to keep track of all of the birth or death or marriage certificates that you have ordered. You might want to file those documents by event. If this is something that you're accumulating quite a bit of, you might say, okay, I'm going to put all the birth certificates in one envelope. I'm going to put all the death certificates in one envelope. Really, it just depends on what you feel comfortable with. Color coding can also work. You could use different colored labels on your binders or on your file folders, depending on what family you are talking about. This helps you to find files quickly. You say, oh, the red file is the Jones family. You could also take and put a red sticker on all the documents related to the Jones family. And that helps you to recognize that this document or this folder or this binder all has to do with the Jones family. So that really helps you to find things very quickly. And it also helps you to have a system that you can use to put everything away so that you can quickly find it later. There are some definite types of paper that we can use that will help us summarize our information and will help us to keep things all together in a paper file. There are some forms that you can print from the internet, and on the bottom of this page you will see some of the places where you can find free forms, and those are also on the handout if you want to look for those. Ancestry is a source for the forms, and there's also some at the Family Tree Magazine website. So these are basic types of forms that you would use to record information about your particular families. One of the most basic is a family group sheet. And what that is just a sheet that details information that you have collected about a particular family. So in this case, it's George Meadows, who's the father, and Sarah or Sally, who's the mother. So you would record all of the information that you can find on the family group sheet, and that acts as kind of a summary. You could also download a blank timeline, which helps you to put your ancestor in a particular place at a particular time. There are things called individual worksheets where you would put everything that you're finding about a particular individual on a worksheet. There are source summaries. Source summaries are summaries where you can look at a book or look at a microfilm or look at an online database, record what it was, what you found in it, what the date was that you accessed it. So all of these can be helpful for you in your research to help summarize. It's not necessary to use any or even all of these forms. It just depends on what your preference is and how you would like to record. I find that I tend to use family group sheets on paper even today. I like to have a place where I can record all of the information in one place. So I do use family group sheets on paper quite often, and I print them out from Ancestry. So the Family Search Wiki has a suggestion of how you can organize a folder of information for a particular family. You will find some great suggestions for organization in general on the Family Search Wiki. This one happens to be specific to how you might file papers in a folder for a particular family. And they're calling this an easy system with one file and one family in one file folder. So the way they're doing it is they're putting one family in each file folder. And it's going to be consisting of a father, a mother, and their children, something that would be recorded on a family group sheet. And it's telling you what you can put in this folder to facilitate this type of filing. You could put a family group sheet or a family group record that we just talked about. You could put a pedigree chart, which shows the location of this family in your family tree. You could put a research log in there, which tells you what you've looked at, what types of sources you've consulted. And then you can put the copies of the source documents that you found. So this is a really good systematic way of helping you to keep track of the research that you're doing on a particular ancestor or on your family. These are documents that are, again, not required. They are just whatever you feel comfortable with. But this is a good suggestion for something to get started with and a filing system that may work for you. So another component of this is if you're going to develop a system, it's to develop good habits around those systems. Now, it's great to start out with a system to say, yeah, I'm going to get file folders and I'm going to put people's names on them and I'm going to color code them and I'm going to put different documents in them. But the system is no good if you don't maintain it. So that's where the developing good habits part comes in. You need to develop your good habits and maintain those so that you can stick with your filing system. One of the things that we like to do is we like to set aside time weekly or monthly for filing. So say you have a slow day every Saturday, and maybe Saturday morning you could sit down with your coffee and your genealogy papers, and you can start filing them. One of the things that gets done on one of the Facebook groups that I belong to called the Genealogy Squad is there's something called Filing Friday. And every Friday, Cindy Engel posts something that she's going to be working on as far as filing goes. So she's challenged the members of the Genealogy Squad to do their own filing on Friday. And that's a sort of a follow through with this, to set aside a time that works for you for actually filing. So making the filing time of your genealogy records as important as your research time, because your research time will benefit. You might also at the same time want to regularly update your to-do list. We all have to-do lists when it comes to genealogy research. Keeping your to-do list updated, crossing off the things that you've done, adding things to it that you want to do, those would be good things to do at the same time as you're filing. Get rid of unneeded paper or clutter. I am probably the worst at holding on to pieces of paper. I swear to you, I have every piece of paper of every genealogy project I've ever worked on for the last 25 years. And I really have a hard time parting with paper, even if I don't need it. But it is a good idea to go through and start sorting through things that you don't need anymore, because that gets rid of the clutter. It makes less that you have to file. It makes less that you have to go through. So make a commitment to discarding unneeded paper. Set up an area dedicated to genealogy in your house. A lot of us are looking around at our houses and we're looking at rededicating some of the space that we might not use for things that we can do to, use our space more wisely. So if you're looking to do more genealogy, find a place in your house that you can dedicate to doing your genealogy research. This is going to help you be more organized. This is going to give you a place to do the research. It's going to give you a place to file. It's going to give you a place to store the things that you need. So setting up a specific area is a good idea. And also commit to setting goals for your research. We talked about those research times when we go down the rabbit hole and we end up somewhere we didn't expect to. If you set goals for your research, you may end up doing less of that and being more efficient with your time. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about electronic systems. So, of course, these days, it seems like a lot of what we're doing is computer-based, it's iPad-based, it's even phone-based. There are tons of options for electronic systems. At the most basic, we're talking about systems that are either cloud-based, meaning stored online and not stored on your particular computer, or desktop systems, which are stored on your computer. So there are, of course, differences to those, and benefits, and also some things that are not so great about either one. So there's lots of options for cloud-based organizing, and some of these things you may have heard of, some of these things maybe you haven't. Things like iCloud and Google Drive and Dropbox, those are places online where you can store and also share documents. Some of them have fees associated with them, meaning you get so much storage space for a fee. Others are free, but they are options for storing your information, including your files and your genealogy software online. So any of these are things that you may or may not have heard of, but they are options for doing that. Some of the advantages to storing your files online, there's certainly some really good advantages. One of them being access your files from anywhere. So if you are, say, visiting your family and you want to be able to look at that death certificate that you got for your great-grandfather, if you store it in one of these online cloud-based systems, you would have access to that file from your device, your phone, your laptop, whatever it is you have with you. You can find what you're looking for very quickly because you can search your documents right from your device. You don't have to go to a filing cabinet. You don't have to go to a different room. You can search directly from your device. You can easily share things with others. If your cousin wants a copy of your great-grandfather's death certificate, all you have to do is just share that file from wherever you're storing it. You can back up your files to minimize loss. This is probably one of the most important advantages to storing your files online, is that if you have something that happens in your house, not a lot of us have fires, but they do happen. But some of us have are floods. How many times has our basement flooded? How many times have things faded because of heat or cold? Minimizing loss by keeping your files backed up online is something that you will be very happy you did if you have one of these awful disasters. That means that you have copies of everything that you need for your genealogy readily available online. You can easily make notes and to-do lists. You can type them in. You can take pictures of things with your phone. You can instantly add things to your to-do list. You can store all of your records and your pictures in one place. It's incredibly convenient. So as far as convenience goes, online storage cannot be beat for convenience. Another thing that you would probably want to consider if you are committing to doing organizational things with your genealogy is to use genealogy-specific software. There are lots and lots and lots of options available for genealogy-specific software. And again, there are two types. There are cloud-based, which is online, and then there are softwares that are designed for just our computer. Again, it really depends on your comfort level. It depends on how much you want to spend. A lot of different variables when it comes to choosing genealogy-specific software. But genealogy-specific software is going to give us options of things that we can do specifically with the information we're collecting about our family history. Some of the brand names, and you may have heard of some of these already, you may be using some of these. There are different, as I said, different types. There's online softwares, and then there's softwares that are stored on your computer only. Some of the ones that you will hear about that are online are Ancestry, of course, Family Search, MyHeritage, Find My Past, and Genie. Those are some of the softwares that can be accessed online. Most of them are associated with a monthly fee. Family Search and Genie are both free, but the others are associated with a monthly fee. For the desktop, there are quite a few options as well. Personally, I use Roots Magic. I really like that software. Genealogy software can do a lot of things for you. It can record all of your information. It can record all of your sources. It can make charts very easily. It can generate family group sheets like we saw that were handwritten. It can do that very easily. You can look people up very quickly. So definitely it is worth the time and effort to put your information into genealogy software. You can also upload pictures and documents to genealogy software. So it's another place to be able to store your information. Just be sure to back it up if you're going to store it on your computer. All right, so even as we're trying to find efficient ways of filing our papers, we really need to be thinking about how are we going to make our research process more organized. And one of the ways that we can do that is by following what is known in genealogy as the GPS, or the Genealogical Proof Standard. Now, this is a thing that is something that if you're a professional genealogist, you're pretty familiar with what is known as the Genealogical Proof Standard. And this was set up by the National Genealogical Society as a set of guidelines for professional researchers to use. Well, you think to yourself, well, I'm just doing this as a hobby. It's just fun. I'm not interested in publishing or anything like that. Well, the Genealogical Proof Standard can serve as a guide for anyone doing research. And it contains these 5 points. And some of them are going to be more important than others, but these are the 5 points of the Genealogical Proof Standard. They include thorough research, which is something we're all doing, informative citations, which might not be something we're all doing, analysis and comparison of evidence, which you are doing this, whether you realize it or not, resolution of conflicting evidence, again, something that a lot of us are also doing automatically, and then a written statement, which I find a written statement, although it sounds scary, is probably something that everybody can benefit from. Because a lot of times, until you write out what you have researched, you don't understand what's missing, you don't know what's missing, and things become very obvious after you have written things out. So I highly recommend it. So with thorough research, some of the components of thorough research. First thing we want to do is we want to ask a question. And that's easy enough because we're always asking questions. So for example, if our question is, when was Michael O'Brien born? That's our question, and that's what we're going to work on. So our procedure might be that we want to make a list of sources that might be able to tell us the answer to that question. A census record can give us an approximate year. If we can find a birth or a baptism record for him, that will tell us a date. A marriage record might give us his age. So any of these are possible sources that we might be able to find when Michael O'Brien was born. When we need to figure out where and how to access these sources. Are we going to look for them online? Are we going to go to a library? How are we going to do them? How are we going to access these sources? We're then going to consult the sources, and we're going to write down the sources we've consulted and what we found out from those sources. That way we're not going back over them again a million times and saying, did I check that or did I not check that? Making sure that we have all of that written down. So that's basically what thorough research entails. It entails a lot of the things that we're already doing, but maybe just keeping a little bit better track of the research that we've done. Second part of the GPS is the informative citations. Now, this is a part that a lot of us groan about, myself included, but it really does pay to keep track of where you find things. I don't know about you, but I've got plenty of newspaper articles, obituaries, things copied from books that I found years ago, and I failed to write down where I found them. So now I've got this great obituary for this ancestor, and I have no idea what newspaper it was in. I have no idea of the date. I have nothing written on it. So if we keep track of our sources, we are going to save ourselves a lot of heartache later on. But we can think of keeping track of our sources as who, what, where, when, why. So if we answer those questions, then we will be documenting our sources well enough. And one of the things that I try to tell people as far as documenting sources go is that, yes, it's important. It's not important the format that we put it in. It's important that we write enough information so that we can find it later. That's what's going to be important about our sources. We want to know, can I find this later if I need to? That's going to be the most important aspect of the sources. So some of the suggestions that I have for citing sources, for what you could write down that might be helpful to you. What was it that you consulted? Was it a book? Was it a microfilm? Was it an online article? Was it a picture of a birth certificate? Where you consulted it? Was it on Ancestry? Was it at the Clifton Park Library? Where was it? When you consulted it? Okay, did you consult it in November of 2020? What was the date? The information it had, and did it answer the research question that you're working on? So these are just some suggestions for what you can use for citations. Don't get hung up on format or anything like that. Make sure you record enough so that you can find it later. That's the important part. So analysis and resolution. So we've got all this information. We've collected a lot of information. What are we going to do with that? How are we going to make sure that this is what we're looking for? Make a list of the sources that you consulted. Did they help answer your question? What did you find from them? Assess the reliability of your sources. So in other words, sometimes we can rely on sources to be accurate, other times not so much. So for example, when we look at a census record, can we be sure that the information in the census record is correct? We have to make a lot of assumptions that the person who gave the information for the census record knew what they were talking about. However, if we're looking at a birth certificate, and we see that the mother who had the child gave the information, we can be fairly certain that that information is accurate because the mother gave the information. So that's what assessing their reliability means. Look at a source. Can we rely on the information that's in the source? Is there any conflicting evidence, and how do we resolve that? A lot of us are very familiar with census records that give a birth year as one thing, yet a baptism record says something completely different. How do we resolve those conflicts? That's another thing that we need to address. And then finally, has your research question been answered by collecting all of this evidence? So breaking down this research process and answering these questions is going to help us better organize how we do our research. And finally, there's the written statement. Now, a lot of people break out in hives and just are really very uncomfortable when it comes to writing. Well, when I say written, it could mean anything. It could mean a whole story that you write based on your research question. It could mean a timeline, like the one down here, a timeline that says, okay, Michael O'Brien lived here in 1870, he lived here in 1875, etc. You can just write down the major events. You could also let your software do it for you. And that's the beauty of any kind of genealogy software, is if you put this information into your software, your genealogy software will craft a statement for you. And again, that statement is going to be based on the information that you've entered into the genealogy software. So it's not going to give you anything that's not in there. When you get your written statement and see it, then you can see where you need to do more research. It becomes clearer to you. And then the other advantage to it too is that a lot of times when we're sharing our family history with people, they like to see something that's in a story form. So if you write up your research in a story form, that's going to make it a little bit more interesting to people. That's going to be something that they might want to read and look at, as opposed to you just spouting off facts. So that's another thing to consider. All right, pictures, finally pictures, very, very tough situation. I would say that I have to be an advocate for digitizing photographs. I was very fortunate to inherit boxes and boxes and boxes of pictures from my grandparents. They were very heavily geared toward my grandfather's family, but there were hundreds of them. And a lot of times family members would say to me, oh, do you have a picture of Aunt so-and-so? Or I remember when we used to visit this house, and do you have any pictures of it? And I would have to go digging through those boxes looking for the pictures. Until finally one day I said to myself, you know what, this is ridiculous. I've got to do something. So really I committed to digitizing the pictures in those boxes. And digitizing has got a lot of really great advantages and good reasons for you to use it. And probably the biggest one, which we already discussed a little bit about, is stability. If you digitize your pictures, you will decrease the risk of losing those pictures. If we've got one-of-a-kind pictures in a box in our basement and our basement floods, or if we have a fire, then those pictures are going to be lost forever. And I hate to think of the numbers of pictures that are already lost to us. So if we digitize those pictures, we can conceivably have copies of those pictures in lots of different places so that we won't lose those pictures entirely. It's very easy to share digitized photos with other people in your family. You can send them in emails. You can make a family Facebook page where you could share with everybody. You can set up a blog where you talk about different pictures. There are endless ideas and ways to share digitized photographs. It's convenient to find the photos when you want them. Instead of digging through the boxes, you have them right on your computer or on your flash drive. You can look them up by whatever you tag them with. You can put them into your genealogy software. So if you'd like a picture of your great-grandmother next to her name in your genealogy software, that's something you can easily do when your pictures are digitized. And then not to mention storage space. The amount of space that boxes and boxes of pictures take up is daunting. You could take those boxes and store them somewhere off-site, or you could give them to your sister because she's got more room in her house, and you would free up a lot of storage space, but still have the pictures available to you. So digitizing is definitely a good idea when it comes to pictures. How do we do that? This is a huge task. How do we digitize our pictures? Well, there's lots of options, fortunately. We can do them with flatbed scanners, like a lot of us have had for years. We can do them with portable scanners. There's lots of different brands. You can scan things using your phone. There are apps for scanning. You can simply take digital photographs of your pictures. Those are also options. So we can go from the most technological to the very simple. But any of these ways are effective means of digitizing your photographs. And again, it's going to be a personal preference thing, how you do it. One of the things that we run into when we are scanning files of pictures is how do we name them so that we can find them later? If we don't name them, then the software just automatically gives it a really long number that isn't going to make it helpful for us to find them. So we do need to name our files with something. This particular idea comes from Amy Johnson Crow, who is a genealogist who has a blog, and she has some very great ideas on her blog. But this is a way that she uses to scan photos. She writes whatever is written on the back of a photo on an index card and scans the two of them together. That way, the information from the back of the photo is available right in the image of the picture. So this is a brilliant idea. It does take some time, but it's a really good idea for being able to see at a glance what is written on the back. You can also use what's written on the back as a name for your file. Depending on how many characters you're allowed to use in a file name, this may or may not be effective. But it's definitely something to think about when you are scanning your pictures and thinking about how to name those files. A suggestion that I can make for me personally, one of the things that I do when I scan is if I know the year the photo was taken, then I use that first in the beginning of the file name. So if it's a picture of my mother, for example, I might put 1937 Janet Coffin, Athens, New York, if that's where the picture was. So I find when I open up my folders with my pictures in them, they're arranged by date. So that can be very helpful if you use a year that the picture was taken as part of the name. So we've got these boxes of pictures, but how should we store them? This is also a problem with a lot of us. Ideally, you do need to store them in climate controlled conditions, but a lot of us aren't that, we don't have this luxury. So if you have a choice in your house, you want to store them on the main floor. You're not going to want to store them in the attic or in the basement. Under beds, in closets, those are probably the best places within our homes that we could store pictures. Acid-free boxes are always a great option. Those can be purchased online at Amazon. They can be purchased in a lot of craft stores. They're a good investment for keeping the most vulnerable of our pictures stored. You don't want to use adhesives in photo albums. One of the best things that you can use are those photo corners, the little black photo corners, and those are available widely. They can be bought on Amazon. If you can, consider off-site storage if it's an option for you. If you have a storage unit, make sure to store your photograph boxes off the ground in case of flooding. So you want to store them up on top of something so that they will not be subject to flooding or to temperature shifts, which would occur closer to the ground. So storing our scan photos. If we've got hundreds of photos, we're going to have hundreds of files. Where can we store those? Well, there are lots of options. External hard drive, the SD cards that come in cameras, those can also store photos. Flash drives, which is one of my preferred methods, probably not the best, but one of my preferred methods. I have a specific flash drive where I store most of my photos. Cloud storage, again, is a great idea. If you are paying for a Dropbox account or if you have Google Drive, that might be a great place to store your photos, because that way they can't be lost through that way. That would be another extra layer of security. Some people use social media as a backup. They will start a page for their family on Facebook and upload a bunch of pictures to that page. And again, as long as Facebook's around, then your pictures are going to be around. So you can use that as a free backup. You want to make multiple copies of your scanned photos. It might be a good idea to give one to each family member. That way, if something happens to yours, you know that one of your family members has another one. So multiple copies are very useful to have. And also, if you don't want to do it yourself, and a lot of us are really like, we don't have the time to do all of that scanning, there are online photo scanning services. A lot of people feel really squeamish about that, because if you're sending envelopes and boxes of photos through the mail, people get a little scared about that, and with good reason. But any of these scanning services are recommended, and they will do the job. There are also some local scanning services. Ever Present in Troy and McGreevy Pro Lab in Albany will do it. And I also hear that Walmart does it, although I can't confirm that, but that's also another option. So think of outside services if it's something that you don't really want to do yourself. So there are lots of resources out there to help you with organizing your family history. I have some of them listed in your handout, and I suggest that you check these out, because as with the few informational ideas that I've given you today, you're going to be able to find many, many more in these particular resources. And one of the resources is this book, Organizing Your Genealogy. I checked before the program today, and Clifton Park does not have this book, but it is in the Southern Adirondack system. There's about 5 copies in the system, so you can request it. It's a great book. It's got a lot of really great ideas. There's a couple of blogs out there. Organize Your Family History by Janita Adams. She's got a lot of really great ideas and suggestions. There's also the Facebook group called the Organized Genealogist. This is a really good group. It's got thousands of members, people sharing ideas of how to organize. So if you've got specific questions, or if you just want to lurk and see what people are suggesting, I suggest to join the Organized Genealogist Facebook group. You will get a lot of ideas in there. And here's the information. This information is included in your handout, so you can check it out. And if you have any questions, of course, you can always contact me. You can contact me through my email, or you can contact me through my Facebook page, Upstate NY Genealogy by Lisa Dougherty. I'm always here to answer any of your questions if you have them. So please feel free to do that. And if anybody's got any questions now, I'll be happy to answer them.
We did have somebody say that DGU Cloud is a new cloud storage that is less expensive than some of the others.
Great. Wonderful. I'll make note of that and check it out. Yeah, price can be certainly an issue because you do have to pay for a certain amount of storage, but if it's something that's a little less expensive, that's great. And I will look that up and add that to the handout. That's a great idea. Anybody else? Got any questions?
The handout didn't come through with the email this morning, so I will send it after the webinar. So everyone will get the handout that Lisa has mentioned.
Terrific. Wonderful.
Somebody asked about that. And oh, repeat the name of the new cloud storage. DGO. It's DEGOO.
Excellent.
I assume it's DGO. DGO.
I'll check it out.
Cloud, yeah.
Sounds good.
There we go. And if you can access the chat, everyone, one of our participants today has put a link to it in the chat. So if you get down to the bottom of your screen and click on the little chat icon there, you'll see the web address for that one.
Great.
Well, I'll give everyone else another moment or two to come up with any other questions. Do you want to just remind us when your next presentation is?
December 14th, which is a Monday again, and it's going to be on brick walls and breaking down brick walls, suggestions for breaking down brick walls. That's another topic that people struggle with. So we're addressing all the problems here. Hopefully.
Good. Hope everybody get cleaned up here.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we have. Got thanks for another great presentation. Greetings from Ireland.
Oh, great to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in.
Do any of the software mentioned handle photos better than another?
Not that I know of. They're all pretty standard. They're all going to handle probably mostly JPEG files. That seems to be the standard. You might want to check with the software manufacturers before you purchase to make sure that they're going to be able to handle the type of files that you have. So if you've got different types of files, I know like I'm like blanking out as to what some of the other types of files there are for images. But if you are using a different type of file other than JPEG, I would check with the software to make sure it supports those types of files, because it isn't going to be fun if you've got all of your pictures scanned and they're in one particular file format, and then you go to put them in your software and the software doesn't accept it. So I would check beforehand whatever you buy that you can upload. For example, like just a really crazy example is Ancestry. Their online software doesn't accept PDFs, and I find that insane. So that's just a little weird thing. So if you've got a lot of PDFs, you may not want to use Ancestry, but that's just something for you to check into before you purchase software. Okay.
I don't see any other questions right now.
Okay, great. Well, if anybody does have questions that they think of later on, please feel free to email me. I'd be glad to answer them for you, or at least try. And I hope to see everybody next month.
Thanks for joining us today, everybody. Take care.
Thank you very much.